Imagine waking up one morning, talking to your significant other, either in person or via phone, not knowing that was going to be your last conversation. Imagine getting ready for work, heading to that tall high rise, not knowing what was coming your way. Imagine boarding a flight, heading towards a business meeting or a vacation, and not know you will never reach your destination. Imagine being a 12-year-old kid heading to middle school, and when they reach the front gate, they see a teacher freaking out. "We're under attack. Go home. You don't belong here. Go home. Go back to your homes. Tell your parents to pick you up and go home. We're under attack." To those families out there that went through the first three scenarios, I can never understand or feel what you felt, because it didn't happen to me. But that fourth scenario, I went through. And I still remember it till this day. I still remember walking through the gates of my middle school, only to see one of my teachers freak out because our country was under attack. And Representative Ilhan Omar, you have the audacity to just say some people did something. I got some words for you, Alexandria Cortez, and Rashida Tlaib.
Viewer discretion is advised.
I'm going to begin with you, Representative Omar. I saw the clip where the New York Post got its comment from, or the quote. I saw the post. Saw it on YouTube. And let me tell you that your words were not taken out of context or had any room for misinterpretation. Your words were exact. And what you even said after made your case even worse. I'm surprised it hasn't even been talked about yet. Or maybe it has. I don't know. You blame Americans for generalizing all Muslims as terrorists, which is something that we don't do. We identify our enemies. Unfortunately, these enemies of ours use Islam as its political tool to justify any act of terror done against their enemies. You know what they're called? Radical Islamic terrorists. 3 words. 3 words. Those people who attacked us on 9/11 were not just any ordinary Muslim or just anybody who practices the Muslim religion. The Islamic religion, excuse me. These were radical Islamic terrorists who launched an attack, perhaps the worst attack in this country's history. And you saying your civil liberties have been reduced since then? You know what happens when we enter war or a time of war? Certain profiles against certain people unfortunately take place. You don't believe me? Ask your party what they did against the Japanese in World War II. You put them into camps, for crying out loud. Do you see any Muslims today in camps? Do you see any Muslims being deported out of this country? Tell me, have you seen any of this happen? The ban, which you blame our president to be racist for, was a ban on 7 countries identified by the previous administration as possibly countries with strong terrorist ties. And the president says, if you come from one of these countries, you're not coming into the United States. That was a measure of security against 7 nations. It is not a generalization of all Muslim nations Do you even know how many Muslim nations out there consider them and how they consider do you know the number of nations that consider themselves as Muslim nations? Do you know the exact number? 50. Approximately 50 nations consider themselves as Muslim nations. 7 of them were targeted by the previous administration, and on that intelligence were used by this administration to issue the ban. There is no generalization against the Muslim people. We are targeting radical Islamic terrorists. That is it. That's all we're targeting. I know Muslims. I had friends who are Muslims, and I know the difference. They tell me they love America. They tell me they want to be here. They understand what's going on. We are at war. If you don't believe it, just look at the rhetoric that's still out there. Look what's going on in Syria. Look what happened in Iraq, Afghanistan. We are at war. Profiling sucks. But excuse the United States national security infrastructure for trying to identify the enemies that will attack the country. And you know what a personal profile looks like? It's not just because it says Muslim. It could say Muslim, but they'll also identify other key factors. Where have you been? Where have you been the last 6 months? Where have you traveled? Where have you gone? You think a profile is just generalizing to say, oh, you're Muslim, you're terrorist? No, there's other key factors that you failed to talk about, in that speech. So don't sit here acting like a victocrat and say that Americans hate all Muslims. We don't hate Muslims. We have problems with radical Islamic terrorists. And if you can't understand that, then honestly, you need to read some history from the last 20 years. Pick up a book, pick up a newspaper, do some research. Because it's you who's spreading hate. Some people were Saudis, members of al-Qaeda, who attacked the United States. Which brings me to the comments made by Congresswoman Tlaib, who says, and I quote, "They do that all the time, especially women of color. They take our words out of context because they're afraid because we speak the truth, and we speak the truth to power. My sister Ilhan Omar, what she was talking about was uplifting people by supporting their civil liberties and civil rights. She has always condemned any strategy, especially of a person directly impacted by being a refugee herself. The fact that people are taking those words out of context and judging the life of Representative Omar is immoral. It's wrong and needs to be called out by many colleagues in saying that they need to stop targeting her this way. It's absolutely putting her life in danger." I already said that her words weren't taken out of context. She made that generalization because she doesn't understand the situation. Congresswoman Tlaib, she made it. She's generalizing all Americans to hate Muslims and saying that the president's actions are racist. They're not racist. He's not targeting all Muslims. I already told you the history of your party. The history of your party segregated. The history of your party put people in camps. And you're talking about a ban against certain refugees from certain countries where terrorists were known to infiltrate those groups as an act of racism? Get out of here. Get out of here. Victocrats, both of them. It is not because you're a woman, and it's not because you're a Muslim. It's because you're misinterpreting the whole situation that you honestly do not understand. And let me get to Ocasio-Cortez, who not only does not get anything she does, she literally went after a war vet who lost an eye, got 2 bronze stars for fighting these people in Afghanistan. And by these people, I mean the radical Islamic terrorists, before somebody on YouTube or Instagram wants to say that what I'm saying is generalizing of all Muslims and calls me a racist too. So I'm going to be blunt. Radical Islamic terrorists. You have the audacity of saying that you didn't support a bill that Republicans don't support 9/11 funds, compensation funds for victims. Are you kidding me? Here is what the 9/11 Republicans have done for 9/11 victims, and I'm quoting now the Daily Wire. Let me see here. In 2016, the Republican-controlled House Senate passed a bill that allowed 9/11 victims to sue the Saudi Arabian government, which I said were responsible for the attack, the Saudi nationals. Obama vetoed it. The September 11 Victim Fund was signed in September 11, shortly after September 11, 2001, by President George W. Bush. It has been renewed in recent years to keep the funding of the care victims. Jon Stewart praised his administration. I remember seeing that clip where Jon Stewart is praising President Trump for his actions in support of 9/11 victims. For crying out loud, President Trump was from New York. 42 Republicans were also part of the bill that she sponsored for 9/11. And all 3 of you said that the Republicans have done nothing, that Representative Crenshaw has done nothing for this country. Are you kidding me? Keep that in mind when you make stupid comments or try to make stupid generalizations.
Buddy, we have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're turning to the airport.
And who's trying to call me here? American 11, are you trying to call?
Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane.